The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most powerful species in the universe, had been observing Earth for centuries. They marveled at humanity's rapid technological advancements, its creativity, and its potential. But they also saw something that puzzled them. Despite their intelligence and ingenuity, humanity showed an overwhelming fear of conflict. Humans had avoided war, often opting for diplomacy or retreat when confronted with danger. The Council was baffled. They decided to label humanity as the most cowardly species in the galaxy, unworthy of the resources they controlled. The species that had once been admired for its potential was now seen as weak, incapable of defending its place in the cosmos. The time had come for the Galactic Council to make a move: the invasion of Earth. The Zarnok Empire, a vicious, war-hungry race of alien conquerors, was chosen to carry out the mission. Their fleet, a deadly armada capable of wiping out entire worlds, descended upon Earth. They had heard the stories of the cowardly humans and were eager to see the planet fall without a fight. They were certain that Earth would submit without resistance. But the Zarnok Empire had one fatal misunderstanding. They had never met the American Boogeyman. The Zarnok Empire's invasion was swift and brutal. Their ships entered Earth's atmosphere, unleashing waves of destruction on major cities across the globe. Earth's militaries, despite their best efforts, were no match for the Zarnok's advanced weaponry. The invaders' plasma cannons leveled cities, and their genetically engineered soldiers cut down resistance with terrifying ease. It seemed like humanity's worst fears were coming true. Earth was about to fall. But as the Zarnok forces began their occupation, reports began to filter in from one area in particular, a small town in the United States. Unconfirmed reports spoke of a lone figure taking down Zarnok soldiers in ways that didn't make sense. The Zarnok, with their superior firepower and tactics, had never encountered anything like this before. The alien forces assumed it was some sort of human guerrilla effort, but they were wrong. It was much worse. The humans had sent their worst nightmare, the American Boogeyman. John Jack Steele was a name whispered in military circles across the globe. A former elite Navy SEAL, Jack was known for his legendary skill in combat and his ability to vanish into thin air, only to strike when least expected. He was a man who had taken down entire terrorist organizations with nothing but his hands and his wits. After his service, Jack went off the grid, becoming a ghost in the eyes of the military until now. When the Zarnok Empire began its invasion, Jack Steele knew that the time had come. He was no longer a soldier. He was a legend, a living weapon. His enemies had learned to fear him in covert operations, but they hadn't faced anything like the Zarnok. The stakes were higher than ever, and Jack wasn't about to let Earth fall. Using guerrilla tactics, Jack infiltrated Zarnok-controlled areas, taking down their soldiers with brutal efficiency. He wasn't interested in negotiation, surrender, or mercy. He hunted the Zarnok down one by one, leaving a trail of bodies and confusion in his wake. To the Zarnok soldiers, Jack Steele wasn't just a man. He was a nightmare come to life. The Zarnok were not used to losing. They were a proud and terrifying species, with advanced technology and an unshakable belief in their superiority. At first, they dismissed the reports of a lone human soldier. But soon, it became clear that the Boogeyman was real. In their desperation, the Zarnok sent their elite hunter force, a group of genetically enhanced warriors trained to take down the deadliest enemies across the galaxy. These were the Zarnok's best, warriors who had defeated entire armies and conquered uncountable worlds. They were confident that they would easily capture or eliminate the human threat. But Jack Steele wasn't just a soldier. He was a force of nature. The battle that ensued was a massacre. One by one, the Zarnok hunters fell to Steele's incredible skills, using their own weapons against them. Setting traps and striking from the shadows, Steele cut through the Zarnok elite like a hot knife through butter. When the last of the Zarnok hunters lay on the ground, Steele walked away without a single wound. The Zarnok were stunned. They had underestimated humanity. thinking that a few elite soldiers could easily wipe out Earth's defenses. But they hadn't anticipated the Boogeyman. As Steele continued his campaign of terror against the Zarnok, he began to rally Earth's forces. Nations that had been on the verge of collapse found new strength in the wake of Steele's victories. Human soldiers, inspired by the myth of the Boogeyman, began fighting back with a ferocity they had never shown before. The Zarnok forces, once confident in their invincibility, were now facing an enemy they couldn't understand. An enemy that fought with the ferocity of desperation, the determination of survival, and the relentless vengeance of a world pushed to its breaking point. Steele knew the final blow had to come from within the Zarnok's own fleet. He had to destroy their flagship, the Zarnok war beast, the heart of their invasion force. With the help of human resistance, Steele infiltrated the flagship, bypassing its defenses and killing anyone who stood in his way. The Zarnok commanders, once so proud and powerful, could do nothing as Steele planted explosives throughout their ship. As the countdown ticked down, Steele fought his way to the bridge, where the Zarnok general awaited him. The two clashed in a brutal final fight, an epic confrontation between the Boogeyman and the alien invader who had dared to underestimate humanity. In the end, Steele emerged victorious, driving the final blow that would destroy the war beast once and for all. With the flagship destroyed, the Zarnok forces lost all organization. Their once dominant fleet scattered, retreating from Earth in disarray. Humanity had not only survived the invasion, they had defeated the invaders. The Galactic Council watched in shock and disbelief as the once cowardly species, led by a single man, had turned the tide of war. As Earth stood victorious, the Zarnok were forced to admit defeat. The cowardly humans had been anything but. They had been underestimated, and now they were a force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Council, embarrassed by their misjudgment, reconsidered their stance on humanity. The humans were no longer weak. They were powerful, and they had one of the galaxy's deadliest warriors among their ranks. Jack Steele, the Boogeyman, became a legend across the stars. The very name of the American Boogeyman sent fear into the hearts of the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. The message was clear: don't mess with Earth. This story emphasizes the transformation of humanity's reputation in the galaxy from cowardice to respect through the sheer will and ferocity of one man, the American Boogeyman. It blends action, strategy, and the idea that sometimes the most dangerous force isn't the biggest army, but the indomitable spirit of a single soldier. Part 2. For centuries, Earth had remained largely unnoticed by the galactic superpowers. Humanity, living in the cosmic shadows, had shown no interest in expansion beyond their own planet. While their technology was advancing, their approach to conflict was always defensive, diplomatic, peaceful, and when necessary, retreating. In the eyes of the Zergoth coalition, a vast empire spanning hundreds of worlds, humanity was weak. They had observed Earth's avoidance of warfare and concluded that humans were the most cowardly species in the galaxy. The Zergoth, known for their brutal conquests and dominance in the galaxy, saw Earth as an easy target for invasion. They knew that if they acted quickly, humanity would surrender without a fight. But they didn't count on one thing: the American Boogeyman. The Zergoth fleet appeared suddenly, like a storm from the heavens. Massive warships, black as void, dropped into Earth's orbit without warning. Within hours, they had launched their invasion, sending their heavily armed ground forces to crush all resistance. The initial bombardments were devastating. Major cities, including New York, London, and Tokyo, were reduced to rubble under the Zergoth's pulse cannons. Their soldiers, towering behemoths armed with plasma rifles, slaughtered anyone who stood in their way. The Zergoths saw humanity's panic, saw their leader surrendering, and they laughed. On the ground, the human forces, although brave, were no match for the technological superiority of the Zergoth. Earth's military was overwhelmed, and many nations fell into chaos. The invaders moved swiftly, claiming territory after territory, destroying any organized resistance. The Zergith Empire believed that Earth's people were too frightened to put up a real fight. They mocked humanity, calling them the cowardly children of the universe. But the Zergith hadn't counted on Jack, the Boogeyman Steele, a man they could never have imagined in their darkest nightmares. Jack Steele was a former Navy SEAL, a living legend whose name had become synonymous with terror in the darkest corners of military circles. After his service, Jack had vanished, disappearing into the shadows a ghost. He had no desire for fame or recognition. His life was his own. But when the Zergith Empire began their invasion, Jack knew it was time to step back into the world he'd left behind. He was a soldier born from humanity's darkest instincts. He was ruthless, unyielding, and skilled beyond belief. Jack had been trained to survive in the harshest conditions, to fight without mercy, and to outlast any enemy. The Zergith didn't know it yet, but they had awoken something far more dangerous than they could ever anticipate. Jack gathered a small group of former soldiers, survivors of the initial wave of the invasion, and began to orchestrate humanity's first real resistance. But this wasn't about open warfare. This was guerrilla tactics at their finest. Jack had no intention of facing the Zergith head-on. He knew that if humanity stood any chance of surviving, they needed to use the Zergith's overconfidence against them. The first reports of Zergith soldiers turning up dead began circulating quickly. At first, they thought it was a fluke, a mistake in their surveillance, perhaps. But then it happened again, and again. The bodies were always the same. Zergith soldiers expertly killed, their weapons taken, their armor disabled. Who was doing this? The Zergith began to panic. Their patrols were being decimated by an unknown force, a force that was elusive and relentless. Every time they thought they had found the source of the attacks, it vanished, like a shadow. But then, their fears began to grow when they realized they weren't just losing soldiers. They were losing their best. The elite Zergith hunters, the deadliest members of their forces, were now becoming the target of this mysterious assailant, the Boogeyman. Jack Steele wasn't just a man. He was a specter, a relentless force of nature who could strike faster than they could react and disappear before they could retaliate. His attacks were calculated, brutal, and precise. Zergith soldiers would hear nothing until it was too late. They'd be dead before they even knew who struck them down. And then the message was clear. The Boogeyman was real. The Zergith, humiliated and enraged by the constant losses, decided to take drastic action. They sent their elite strike force, the best and deadliest warriors in the entire galaxy, after the human Boogeyman. This was no longer a matter of conquest. It was a matter of revenge. The strike force was dispatched to Earth with a single mission: find and eliminate Jack Steele. These were creatures who had toppled entire civilizations, taken down armies, and destroyed planets. They were sure that no human could match their power. But they were wrong. Jack Steele didn't just fight them. He hunted them. Using his knowledge of Zergith tactics and his unparalleled combat skills, Jack turned the tables on the alien hunters. He lured them into traps, setting up ambushes with an almost supernatural precision. Each time the Zergith strike force thought they had him cornered, they were wrong. Steele killed them one by one, using their own weapons against them, exploiting their weaknesses and sending a clear message. The Boogeyman was not to be trifled with. With the Zergith's elite warriors dead and their forces scattered in disarray, Jack Steele knew it was time for the final strike. The Zergith had a massive warship hovering above Earth, the Zergith Titan, a massive vessel capable of wiping out entire continents. It was their command center, their fortress in the sky. Jack Steele infiltrated the Titan, his tactics as efficient and deadly as ever. He moved through the massive warship's corridors, dispatching Zergith soldiers silently, using stealth and cunning to outwit their superior technology. The Zergith Titan, once thought to be impenetrable, was crumbling under the onslaught of the human who had become their worst nightmare. When Jack reached the command bridge, the Zergith General Vornak awaited him. Vornak, the leader of the invasion, had witnessed the destruction of his best soldiers and the failure of his invasion. He roared in fury as he and Steel clashed in the heart of the Titan. The fight was brutal, each blow resonating with the sound of destruction. But Steel was faster. He was stronger. And in the end, Vornak fell, and with him, the Zergoth invasion crumbled. Jack set the ship's self-destruct mechanism and escaped just before the entire Zergoth fleet was obliterated. The Zergoth Empire, humiliated and decimated, retreated from Earth, leaving behind nothing but their shattered fleet. The survivors of the invasion, who had once laughed at humanity's fear, now feared humans. The Galactic Council, which had once branded humans as weak and cowardly, had now seen the truth. Humanity was capable of horrors far worse than they had ever imagined. Jack Steele, the American Boogeyman, had become a living legend. His name echoed through the stars, and the galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. Earth was no longer a fragile, isolated species. It was a force to be reckoned with. And Jack Steele? He disappeared back into the shadows, just as silently as he had appeared, waiting for the next fight, the next threat to emerge. This new story highlights the transformation of humanity from a cowardly species to one feared and respected across the galaxy, thanks to the unparalleled skill and relentless spirit of one.